the bag on the porch. The first thing I noticed wasn't the cold, it was the sound. That dry, plastic crinkle. It carried through the night air as if the whole world had gone quiet just to let me hear it. The porch light buzzed overhead, casting its pale yellow glow over the familiar wooden steps. My steps. My home, or at least it used to be. And there, shoved up against the corner by the welcome mat that still read "Bless this house" in faded letters, was a black garbage bag. Not just any garbage bag. My garbage bag. Even before I opened it, I knew. The worn leather jacket my mother bought me for my 18th birthday peeked out from the half-tied knot. The edge of my old high school yearbook was wedged beside it, the corner bent and ripped. I froze halfway up the steps, one foot on the first plank, one still in the gravel drive. The smell of damp earth rose from the yard, mixing with the faint scent of the bag's plastic. It was the smell of finality. The front door creaked open. Dad stood there, his shoulders filling the doorway, his face shadowed by the light behind him. Behind him, I could make out shapes, figures moving slightly, shifting weight from foot to foot. My cousins, watching, not saying a word. His voice cut through the cool night air like it was reading a verdict. You're 24. You can't keep living here for free. You need to figure your life out. I stared at him, the words hitting harder than the cold ever could. I wanted to speak, to remind him of the times I'd helped fix his truck in the middle of winter, the months I'd paid the water bill when work was slow for him, the fact that family didn't throw family out on a Tuesday night like this. But my mouth stayed shut. My hand was still in my pocket, clutching my truck keys like they were the only thing keeping me standing. I glanced past him, toward the living room. The couch where I'd fallen asleep watching baseball games with him. The kitchen where Mom would hum while cooking on Sundays. All of it was there, but none of it felt like mine anymore. A cough broke the silence, one of my cousins shifting uncomfortably. Dad's jaw tightened. I'm serious. You can't just drift forever. Take your stuff. For a moment, I thought about refusing, about walking past him and back into the house, sitting down in my old room like I owned the place. But deep down, I knew it was over. I could feel it in the way he stood, feet planted, arms crossed. This wasn't a warning. It was a final push out the door. The plastic bag crackled as I lifted it. It was heavier than it looked. Not just in weight, but in what it meant. I could hear my cousins whispering something behind Dad as I stepped backward. I didn't need to make out the words. I'd heard enough whispers in the past few months to know the tone. Disappointment, judgment, maybe even pity. I didn't give them the satisfaction of looking back. My boots crunched against the gravel as I walked toward my truck, the cold biting through my jacket. The old Chevy sat at the end of the driveway, parked just outside the light's reach. I could barely make out its outline in the dark, but the sight of it was a small comfort. Halfway there, I heard Dad's voice again. You'll thank me one day. I stopped. The bag dangled at my side, my hand tightening around the knot until the plastic bit into my fingers. I almost turned around to say something, to tell him that this wasn't something I'd ever thank him for. That this wasn't tough love, it was just abandonment. But I didn't. I just kept walking. When I reached the truck, I tossed the bag into the passenger seat. It landed with a dull thud, the jacket sliding partly out again. I stood there for a second, hand on the cold metal of the door, staring at the porch light in the distance. It was strange, how the house I'd known my entire life could feel like a stranger's in the span of a few minutes. How the person I'd once trusted most could stand there, arms folded, while I carried my life in a garbage bag. The engine coughed before turning over, the headlights cutting through the darkness. The light caught the edge of the house for one last moment before I pulled onto the road. For the first mile, I didn't feel anything. Then, somewhere between the old gas station and the edge of town, the weight hit me. Not the bag, not the loss of a bed to sleep in, but the fact that I wasn't leaving by choice. I slowed down at a four-way stop, my hand resting on the steering wheel. I could still hear the faint murmur of my cousins, still see the way Dad's shadow fell across the doorway. I gripped the wheel tighter, my jaw locked, and drove on. By the time I reached the back road out of town, the air inside the truck had gone cold. I didn't turn on the heat. Let the cold keep me awake. Keep me sharp. I wasn't sure where I was going yet, maybe to a cheap motel, maybe to crash on a friend's couch. But wherever it would be away from that porch, that house, that bag. Still, the image stayed with me. Black plastic, crinkled under the porch light, stuffed with pieces of my life like trash waiting for pickup. And no matter where I ended up, I knew I'd never forget the sound it made when I first saw it. Life in the small apartment. The first night in the apartment felt like stepping into someone else's forgotten life. The hallway outside smelled faintly of old carpet and fried onions, the kind of scent that clings to a building's bones after decades. My key stuck in the lock at first, and for a second, I thought maybe I'd been given the wrong one. But with a firm twist, the door gave way, swinging open to reveal a space so small I could see the kitchen sink from the front door without taking a step. The walls were a faded beige, scuffed in places where furniture had once rubbed against them. A single overhead light hummed faintly, casting a weak yellow glow over the room. The floor creaked when I walked in, and I noticed the windows were drafty, their thin glass rattling slightly in the evening breeze. I didn't have much to unpack, just 2 garbage bags of clothes, a duffel of tools, and a battered folding chair I'd grabbed from the garage before leaving. That first night, I ate a cold sandwich standing by the counter because I didn't have a table yet. The fridge was empty except for a carton of milk I'd picked up on the way. I sat on the floor after dinner, leaning my back against the wall, staring at the bare corner where a couch might go someday. The sound of footsteps echoed from the apartment above, a steady rhythm that reminded me I wasn't alone here, even if it felt like I was. The neighbors kept to themselves. An older woman down the hall nodded at me once when I passed her carrying groceries, but she didn't say a word. A young man on the second floor smoked on the fire escape most evenings, his cigarette smoke curling through the open window when the wind blew just right. I could hear muffled TV chatter from somewhere, but it was always the same station, like someone had left it running for company. The days blurred quickly. I worked long shifts, the kind where you come home with your feet aching and your shirt sticking to your back. Most nights, I didn't bother cooking, just picked up a greasy paper bag from the diner near work. I'd eat with the TV on low volume, flipping through channels but never settling on anything. My mind wandered too easily. Rent was due sooner than I expected, and money felt thinner than it ever had. I opened the duffel of tools one evening and started setting things aside. The old socket set my dad gave me, a drill I barely used, even a vintage wrench I'd once been proud to own, they all went into a box. I listed them online and sold what I could within a week. Watching them leave stung more than I thought it would, but the envelope of cash tucked into my coat pocket bought me another month of breathing room. The silence in the apartment was the kind that pressed in, especially late at night. Without the hum of conversation, the sound of my own thoughts became louder. I'd catch myself staring at the ceiling for minutes at a time, tracing the faint cracks in the plaster. Sometimes, I'd hear the faint clink of pipes behind the wall, or a door shutting somewhere in the building, and it would jolt me back into the present. There was a small thrift shop a few blocks away, and on one Saturday morning, I wandered in. I left with a mismatched mug and a second-hand blanket that smelled faintly of lavender. They were small things, but having them made the apartment feel a little less like a temporary stop. I draped the blanket over the back of the folding chair, pretending it was a real piece of furniture. I avoided calls from my family. The phone would buzz, their names lighting up the screen, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. My thumb would hover over the green button, then retreat. I wasn't ready for the questions, the judgment, or even the sound of their voices. Instead, I'd set the phone down and busy myself with small tasks, washing a single plate, folding the 2 shirts I wore most often, rearranging the few items on the counter like it mattered. One evening, I came home to find a small envelope slid under my door. It was from the building manager, reminding tenants about trash day. The handwriting was neat, almost formal, and for some reason, it made me feel like a real resident here, not just someone passing through. I taped the note to the fridge, not because I needed the reminder, but because it filled a little bit of the empty space. I learned the building's rhythms. The neighbor upstairs vacuumed every Thursday morning without fail. The pipes banged loudly at exactly 6:15 a.m., waking me whether I wanted it or not. Someone always burned toast around 8 p.m., filling the hallway with that sharp, almost sweet scent. It wasn't home. Not yet. But it was becoming a place I knew. Still, there were nights when I'd sit by the window with the lights off, watching the street below. Old cars rumbled by, the headlights sweeping across cracked sidewalks. A stray cat made its rounds, leaping gracefully between trash cans. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn would echo. Those moments made me feel both small and strangely grounded, like the world kept moving whether I was ready to or not. One Sunday, I walked to the park a few blocks over. The grass was patchy, the benches weathered, but there was a quiet charm to it. I bought a cup of coffee from a vendor with a cart and sat watching kids chase each other near the swings. The sun felt good on my face. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the weight of everything pressing down so hard. When I got back to the apartment, the air inside was cooler, and the faint scent of the thrift shop blanket greeted me. I set the coffee cup on the counter, stood in the middle of the room, and realized I knew exactly where the creaky spots were now. I knew how the light hit the wall in the morning and where the shadow stretched at night. It was still small, still imperfect, but it was mine. And for the moment, that was enough. The unexpected news. It happened on a Tuesday evening, one of those dull, gray days when the air felt like wet paper and the streetlights blinked on too early. I had stopped by the grocery store for instant noodles and a jar of cheap peanut butter, the kind that always separated into oil and sludge no matter how much you stirred it. My cart squeaked with every push, a sound so irritating it almost drowned out the voices drifting from the next aisle. I wasn't paying attention at first, just scanning the dented cans in the discount bin, but then I caught a name, my dad's name, slipping out in a hushed, urgent tone. I froze, my hand still resting on a can of tomato soup. Two familiar figures stood by the display of day-old bread. Mr. Hargrove, my old neighbor from 3 houses down, and Mrs. Dixon, who had lived directly across from us for as long as I could remember. They looked older, grayer, a little more worn around the edges. Their carts faced each other, blocking the aisle like 2 ships docked for a private exchange. "Can't believe it's gotten that bad," Mrs. Dixon whispered, shaking her head. "Your cousin, what's his name? He's been making terrible choices. And your dad's the one cleaning up after him." Mr. Hargrove let out a long sigh, the kind of exhale that carried more weight than words. "Yeah. Folks are saying there's shouting at the house almost every night now. Neighbors have been calling the cops. It's a mess." I pretended to be invested in the soup labels, flipping them over as if calories mattered more than the pounding in my chest. My cousin. My cousin was trouble even as a kid. Always in some scheme, always lying, always skating by on charm until it ran out. But hearing that his mess had spilled into my father's house was different. I forced myself to step away, to move toward the refrigerated section, but their words clung to me like static. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed with the takeout box from dinner still unopened on the counter. The noodles inside had gone cold hours ago. I stared at the wall, my mind replaying every fragment of their conversation. My cousin's bad decisions. My dad cleaning up after him. Shouting in the house. Police calls. I told myself it didn't matter. I wasn't part of that life anymore. I had been shoved out of it, forced to survive on my own. But the image of my father, tired, frustrated, trapped in chaos, kept surfacing like an unwelcome memory. The next morning, my phone lit up with 3 missed calls from Dad. No voicemails, just the empty notification that he had tried. I stayed at the screen until it went black again. Then I tossed it onto the couch, face down, like that would somehow mute the weight of it. I told myself I was too busy for this. My shift at the warehouse was long. My feet ached every night, and my apartment was still half furnished because I couldn't afford anything beyond essentials. But the truth was simpler, I wasn't ready to hear his voice. Not after the way things had ended. By Thursday, there were more missed calls. By Saturday, they had become a daily occurrence, always in the mornings, as if he thought I'd been most willing to pick up before the day wore me down. I never answered. I'd glance at the buzzing phone, feel the temptation, and then push it aside. One evening, after a particularly grueling shift, I found myself standing at my kitchen sink, rinsing a single fork under cold water. The faucet hissed. The air smelled faintly of damp plaster, and I realized I had been counting the days since I'd seen my father's face. Months now, maybe longer than I wanted to admit. The phone buzzed again. His name lit up the screen, the familiar combination of letters that made my stomach tighten. My hand hovered over it for a second, my thumb twitching as if it wanted to swipe right and answer. But the memory of our last conversation, the words, the tone, the finality, was enough to make me pull away. That night, I dreamed about the old house. The creak of the front steps, the smell of my mother's perfume still lingering in the hallway, the cluttered garage where I used to work late into the night. In the dream, the house was dark except for the kitchen, where a shadow moved back and forth. I couldn't see the face, but I knew it wasn't my father. I woke up with my heart pounding, the sheets twisted around my legs. Sunday morning brought another missed call, then another. By noon, there were 3 more. I shoved the phone into my jacket pocket and left the apartment, wandering aimlessly through the streets just to avoid the urge to answer. It was while I was sitting on a park bench, watching a couple of kids chase a soccer ball across the patch of grass, that I noticed something. I wasn't just avoiding my father. I was avoiding the truth. Something was wrong at that house, worse than I wanted to imagine. And no matter how much I told myself it wasn't my problem, the knot in my stomach said otherwise. But knowing and acting are 2 very different things. So I went home, reheated yesterday's noodles, and tried to lose myself in the faint hum of the refrigerator. Still, the calls didn't stop. And neither did the feeling that, sooner or later, I'd have to face whatever waited on the other end of the line. The first time my phone lit up with Dad's number, I froze mid-bite, the plastic fork suspended in the air over your half-eaten microwave dinner. It had been weeks since I'd heard his voice in person, months since I'd been anywhere near that house. I let it ring out, watching the digits fade from the screen. A minute later, a voicemail icon appeared. At first, I didn't listen. I told myself it didn't matter, probably just some casual check-in he thought I'd entertain out of obligation. But curiosity always worked on me like a slow leak in a tire, wearing down my resolve. 2 days later, I gave in. "Call me," his voice said, flat and clipped. Nothing more. I almost laughed. That was it? No apology, no explanation, just 2 words. The kind of message you'd leave a coworker when you needed the stapler back. I deleted it without saving. But then he called again. And again. Within 2 weeks, I had 5 missed calls, each followed by another short voicemail. The pattern became predictable. He'd call mid-morning on his break or late in the evening when the quiet settled in at his house. By the 3rd week, the tone shifted. "Call me when you can. We need to talk. This is important." I ignored everyone, but I never stopped listening to them. 7 months passed, and I counted, because counting made it easier to detach. 53 missed calls. 53 times I watched his name appear and felt that instinctive pull in my chest to answer, the way muscle memory tells your hand to catch something falling. And 53 times I reminded myself why I couldn't. Some messages I replayed more than once. Not because I missed him, at least, that's what I told myself, but because I was dissecting them. I wanted to know if his voice sounded regretful or just tired, if his pauses meant he was choosing his words carefully or if he was just running out of things to say. The one that stuck with me came late on a Tuesday night. His voice cracked halfway through, not loud enough for a sob, but enough for me to hear the weight behind it. "I was wrong," he said. The words were rushed, like if he didn't spit them out fast enough. They dissolved before they reached me. Then silence. He hung up before explaining. "I didn't delete that one. Not right away. Then the cousins started texting. The same ones who had stood beside him that night, arms crossed, eyes avoiding mine as my life was packed into garbage bags. They used phrases like, "It's not what you think, and you should hear his side." One even had the nerve to write, "Family's all we've got." I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Funny how family only became important when it was convenient for them. One afternoon, while folding laundry in the cramped corner of my living room, my phone rang again. "Dad." I watched the screen until it stopped, then immediately tapped on voicemail. His tone this time was urgent, almost frantic. "Please, just 5 minutes. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to talk." I sat there with a sock in one hand and the phone in the other, my stomach twisting. For a second, I thought about it. Just 5 minutes. But I knew better. 5 minutes would turn into a conversation into a favor, and before I knew it, I'd be standing on that porch again with the weight of their judgments pressing down on me. Instead, I tossed the phone onto the couch and went back to folding. The thing about ignoring someone is that you start to notice patterns in their attempts to reach you. Mondays and Thursdays were his most persistent days. Late-night calls meant he'd been drinking coffee too late, something he always did when he was anxious. Shorter messages came after long pauses between calls, like he'd built up the courage to try again and then ran out of words. Some nights, I'd lie in bed and scroll through the list of missed calls, the little red icons stacked one after another. They looked like tiny warnings, a reminder that no matter how far I thought I'd gotten, the past had a way of finding me through 10 digits on a screen. The strangest moment came in month 6. I got home from work to find a small padded envelope wedged between my door and the frame. No return address, just my name in block letters. Inside was a keychain, an old, faded one I'd had in high school, the kind you win from a vending machine at the mall. Attached to it was a folded note. "You left this behind. Thought you might want it back. Dad." I set it on the counter and stared at it for a long time. He could have mailed it. He could have asked someone else to drop it off. But no, he'd been here, at my door, close enough to knock, yet still choosing not to. The keychain stayed there for days. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't use it either. It was just another piece of the pile, another unspoken thing between us. By the 7th month, his messages were less frequent but heavier. He'd stopped trying to make small talk and instead left pieces of sentences that didn't explain enough to satisfy me, but gave just enough to keep me listening. I'm not proud of how it went down. I should have done more to stop it. You deserved better. Each one was like a stone dropped into still water, rippling through the quiet life I'd built. I told myself the resentment was still too strong, that I wasn't ready, and maybe I wasn't. But the truth was, the longer this went on, the harder it was to tell if I was protecting myself from him, or from the part of me that still wanted to call back. So I let the voicemails pile up, 53 and counting. And every time I listened to the newest one, I'd scroll back to that cracked voice on a Tuesday night saying, I was wrong, and wonder if that was supposed to be enough. The gravel under my tires makes a familiar crunch, the same sound I'd heard every day growing up, but now it feels foreign, like I'm trespassing on a place I once called home. The sun hangs low, a tired gold spilling across the cracked driveway. I cut the engine, and for a second, I just sit there, gripping the steering wheel like it's the only thing tethering me to the moment. My heart is a steady, deliberate thump. When I finally step out, the air smells faintly of damp leaves and something older, dust, maybe, or time itself. The front porch boards are bowed, their paint peeling in long, curling strips. The swing on the right side still hangs there, but the chain on one end is broken, leaving it tilted like a wounded limb. Then the door creaks open. Dad steps out slowly, shoulders not as squared as I remember. His hair, once jet black, is now a mix of salt and pepper. He's wearing the same kind of flannel shirt he always did, only it hangs looser, like even his clothes have given up trying to hold him together. His eyes find mine and stay there. I thought I was teaching you responsibility, he says, voice low, words tumbling out like they've been rehearsed but never perfected. I didn't know I was breaking something we couldn't fix. I nod, my throat too tight to let words pass easily. I came to talk, I say, steady but clipped, not to stay. He doesn't flinch, just swallows, like he expected that answer. All right, he murmurs, talking's more than I deserve. The space between us feels like it's filled with all the years we've lost, thick, heavy, impossible to cross in a single step. But I follow him up the creaking porch anyway. The boards groan under my boots, and I wonder if they are warning me or welcoming me. Inside, the living room is darker than I remember. The curtains are pulled halfway, muting the daylight. The old brown couch is still there, but the cushions have sunken into themselves. A layer of dust coats the coffee table, except for 2 clean circles where mugs must have been set recently. The TV sits silent in the corner. Place hasn't seen much company, Dad says with a dry smile that fades almost instantly. I glance toward the kitchen. The smell of stale coffee lingers in the air, the kind that's been reheated one too many times. A stack of unopened mail rests on the counter, some envelopes yellowing at the edges. We sit at the table, same one where we'd eaten dinners in silence after Mom left. Same one where arguments used to ricochet across the wood like stray bullets. Now, the silence feels different. It's not tense. It's cautious. So, I start, not sure where to aim the words. What happened to the cousins? His gaze drops to the table. They are gone. Moved out months ago. Wasn't working out. I can't help the small, humorless laugh that escapes me. Didn't see that coming, I mutter. Dad sighs, rubbing his palms over his knees. Your cousin made some choices. Bad ones. Got into trouble. Thought I was helping him, but I guess I was just blind. His words are measured, but I can hear the weariness under them. The man who once barked orders now speaks like he's careful not to scare away whatever fragile bridge we might be building. Why all the calls? I finally ask. 7 months. 50-something times. Why? His eyes meet mine again. Because I realized I was wrong. And because every day I didn't say it was another day I was losing you for good. The weight of his words sits between us, and I don't rush to fill the silence. Outside, a crow calls from somewhere beyond the yard, the sound sharp and lonely. I look around, taking in the house I'd been thrown out of, now a shadow of itself. There's no trace of the loud voices, the slammed doors, the constant edge of tension. It's quieter, but emptier, too. You look older, I say before I can stop myself. He smiles faintly. So do you. We both know it's not just the years that aged us. It's what happened in them. Minutes pass like hours, until Dad finally stands. Want some coffee? He asks. Sure, I say, though I don't even like coffee. He moves slower than I remember, his back bent just slightly. The sound of the kettle fills the room, and for a moment, it's almost like nothing's changed, like this could be any Sunday afternoon from years ago. When he sets the mug in front of me, our fingers nearly brush. I don't pull away. We sip in silence, the warmth of the coffee doing little to thaw the frost between us. But it's something. I never wanted to lose you, he says suddenly. My hand tightens around the mug. You didn't have to. He nods, the admission sitting heavy in the air. I know. The wind rattles the window, and I glance outside. The yard's overgrown, the fence leaning in places. It's not the house I remember, but maybe that's fitting. I'm not the same person who left, either. We talk for a while, small things, surface level. Work, the weather, the kind of conversation people have when they're not ready to open the locked doors inside themselves. As I get up to leave, Dad follows me to the porch. The late afternoon light is softer now, the shadows stretching long across the yard. I don't expect you to forgive me, he says, but I hope someday you can. I don't promise him anything, but I also don't turn away as quickly as I thought I would. When I reach the truck, I look back. He's still standing there, one hand on the porch post, watching like he's afraid if he blinks, I'll disappear again. I get in, start the engine, and for a split second, I imagine what it would be like to stay a little longer. But I don't. The road ahead feels both familiar and unknown, the same way he does now.